Hello, it's me, Andrine, your Jewish American priestess. And today we're doing the Hebrunes reading for the new moon of Nisan, which is upon us, even as we speak. It's a fortuitous week because we have the vernal equinox, we have the new moon of Nisan, and also my birthday. So a lot of stuff going on for me this week. Very exciting. I was going to do just a single reading today, but because we talked about last time the significance of the Emperor card being corresponding with the month of Nisan and the constellation of Aries, I brought out our Emperor cards today. We're just going to look at them real briefly before we get into the reading. I'm not going to do 4 separate readings today. I got other things to do in terms of planning for my birthday. So let's look at this. The Aquarian Tarot deck shows us this Emperor. You can see he's got a cap. He's got a little beard. He's got a scepter that looks like an ankh. Some beautiful flowers. I'm guessing those are irises or lilies that come with this time of year. And he sits on his throne that has the ram's heads on the sides there. Looks like somebody I recognize. So that's the Aquarian Tarot. For the Wildwood Tarot, we have the Green Man as our Emperor. He's got a horn, which is interesting. It's like a horn, like an oil horn that one might use to anoint someone. His scepter looks like it's actually some sort of spear, perhaps. He's got this little guy sitting on the edge of the cauldron, and the cauldron itself is decorated with little faces as well. And even though it's a horn possibly for anointing, or it doesn't look like a horn you can blow, but maybe there's a hole in the side, I don't know. Still, horns, which represent the ram again, the shofar, the ram's horn that goes with this month. So that's our Green Man. In the Botticelli Tarot, we have a very traditional looking emperor. He's got an orb and a sword on this one. It looks like his robe is red. He's got a golden crown. He sits on a stony throne. And a lot of red going on here, which again represents sometimes the carnal nature of humanity. And then our last but not least, Rider-Waite-Smith Emperor, who looks like this. He's got the ram's horns on his stone throne, this cap kind of crown on it. Looks like a little leaflet coming off the top. Again, more rams up above. His ankh-shaped scepter. Looks like he's wearing armor underneath his red cape. And although there are stony mountains in the back, I guess he has an orb too. Look at that. Golden orb. And although there's stony mountains in the background, you can also see a little tiny bit of water. So those are our emperors for today, and they are representing our month of Nisan, or the constellation of Aries, and we're going to just kind of scatter them around here on the edges so that they can watch as we do our reading. In our reading today, we're going to do a full spread of the Hebrunes and read what comes up. And the way we do that is to shuffle them up and then dump the whole thing out. What's coming up for the month of Nisan as we enter into it today? Okay, so we're going to take all the ones that are face down, remove them from the spread, and then this is our reading. We're going to go turn them all so that they're upright and readable. get into it and see what we have here today. So starting off the reading with what our central issue is here, I'm seeing the Vav, and we'll pull that up here so you can see it closely. The Vav is the letter that means and its basic concept is connection. It's a tall, straight spine with a slightly bowed head. So standing tall with a slight bit of humility. Also a taproot that goes into the ground nice and deep like a dandelion root. It is a peg or a hook. Oftentimes those were made out of gold or silver or some other precious metal that would be used to tether a very important structure to the ground in the wilderness. So we're talking about right now, this time of year, where we're the liberation of the Israelites from Mitzrayim, the narrow place where they were held enslaved for 400 years or so. And they will go out into the desert and they learn to dwell as free people, but in a very harsh environment. And these pegs were used to connect these structures to the ground so they wouldn't blow away in the wilderness. So they're very valuable. They were also used to connect the veils around the Holy of Holies to protect the ark once it was delivered or created by the directions of the divine. So this letter speaks to connection with divinity, this unity that one has, joining the heaven and the earth. And it is the number 6. So it's about the 6th day of creation, which is Friday generally. But it means that things are almost finished. And because it's the number 6, it also has to do with the 6 different directions. So east, west, north, south, above and below. All the different directions that we sense the divine dwells in. And all the different directions that make up the sides of the celestial temple. In Hebrew, if one adds a vav to a verb, it can change the tense of that verb from past to future or from future to past. So it governs over time on some level. It is the central letter in the divine name, the Yud He Vav He. So it is that connecting piece, connecting the two He's within the divine name. And it is connected with the tribe of Issachar. Issachar, who is the one who is said to have studied, and it connects wealth with studying. So interesting with the emperor here, the emperor being the one who seems to have all the wealth. The Vav connects that with studying Torah in particular. But Torah can mean not just the book, it can mean all kinds of learning, any kind of learning that comes from the divine. And that's our central issue, having to do with connection, maybe connection with the divine, connection with ourselves, but perhaps also connection with another. As I look at the Hebrunes and how they relate to the classic tarot, the Vav in my book is connected to the Lover's card because it is about connection with the divine and with another. So let's move backwards first. For me, I read from left to right. So this area over here is going to be the past, and this area over here is going to be what's coming. So before now, we've had the letter Kaf. And Kaf is the letter that represents the palm of a hand. So there's something about an exchange, again, between giving and receiving. It is the first letter of the word koach, which means power. So there's something to do with power and hands. And it can be the power that comes with oppression, or it can have to do with the power that comes with being open to giving and or receiving if you need that. It also is the first letter of the word Keter, which means crown, which is perfect again for our emperor. Each of these emperors has some kind of head covering that crowns them. And so it has to do with this binary foundation of wealth and poverty. Where are we on that continuum between wealth and poverty? Are we so wealthy that we have the means to give to others? Or are we so impoverished that we need to ask for help from those who have more? And we need to find a balance there on both sides of that equation. It does correspond for me to the patriarch Yitzhak, who is the son of Abraham, the son of Abraham, Isaac, who was bound hand and foot as he was taken up the mountain to be sacrificed and then saved by the divine messenger. So something about the patriarch Yitzhak, or Isaac, is connected to that idea of being both oppressed but then also protected by the hand of the divine. And that's come right before us, that we've had some kind of oppression perhaps, and now we're moving into a time of connection. And before that, even further back, we have the letter Tzadi. And the letter Tzadi is the letter that means justice or righteousness. And justice and righteousness have to do with having a connection between our actions and divine will. If we are able to hear the voice of the divine and follow the guidance and put those directions into action in the world, we will be a tzaddik, which is to say someone who is righteous, or we will pursue justice, which is called tzedek in Hebrew. The yud and the nun combined here to make the tzadi. Nun, which is on the left side, looks like humility, and on the right side we have the yud, which is the first letter of the divine name. So there's again this message about being slightly humble, but the divine having your back. So tzadi is the letter that corresponds to the month of Shvat, which came a couple months ago, where we had the New Year of the Trees. So this is, in the past, we've had this drive toward justice, this desire to become righteous. And now we've moved into a time of power, through a time of power into a time of connection. Way up high in our reading, we have the letter Tet, and Tet is the letter that is looks like a cup or a vessel of some sort. Some say it looks like a womb, and it is the number 9, so it can correspond to the 9 months of gestation in the body. It's the first letter of the word Tov, which means goodness or good. So something that's come before now has been gestating, perhaps. Maybe there's been some sort of idea or project that has been gestating, and it was good. It had the goodness within it, like a cup of something wonderful. And so this thing that's contained goodness has come before. The number 9 also corresponds to some sort of renewal, because when we hear the blast of the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, it comes in sets of 9. And so there's this idea of something renewing happening, some spiral of renewal that's come before. And the Tet in my book corresponds to the Empress, who I just did a reading about her a couple of days ago, having to do with this fertility of the vernal equinox. So the Empress, that idea of the ultimate creativity, nurturing, maternal fecundity, fertility that's come before now. So something good has been gestated, and it was really wonderful. It's way up high in our reading, so it corresponds to something very, very helpful. Way down below, on the very bottom here, we have the letter Zayin, and Zayin is the letter that is the number 7, so it corresponds to the 7th day of creation, something final, something finished here. It is also about power, a sword and a scepter, and we have both swords and scepters in our emperors here today. So there's been some kind of wielding of power, perhaps, that brought something to completion. And the Zion is the letter that it corresponds to the Shabbat bride, so that crowning glory on the finality of creation. And it corresponds to the tribe of Zebulun, who represents business. So something around one's business or maybe even finances. It goes right hand in hand with the Vav, which is number 6, because it is said that Zebulun was the one who went off and earned income so that Issachar could study. So they were brothers, and they worked together to create a partnership so that one would make the funds so the other had the leisure to study Torah. And so something about power, this letter actually in my book corresponds to the Emperor card, because it is about that idea of power and authority, and again those scepters and those swords and the sovereignty, some sort of completion and the sense of magic. And the month of Nisan is the first month of the year, and it is the new year of the kings, where we count the reign of a king as beginning in the month of Nisan. So that is what Zion kind of represents here. It's down very low on the reading, which usually can indicate something that is not helpful, but it also can represent something that there's fear around. So maybe there's been some fear about moving into Nisan, some fear about accepting one's own sovereignty. And that's come right before now. So we know as we've moved into this season, has there been something that has been hesitant or uncomfortable or uncertain, perhaps, having to do with power? Because we have Keter here with, Koach here with power, and Zion with the sword and the scepter also representing power. That there's been some kind of power concerns, maybe fears around power. And up high on this reading, we have the letter Shin. Shin is the letter that represents the mother letter of fire. And fire is, of course, one of the creation elements. It is the letter that represents the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky. And so we have this, right now, this conjunction of the vernal equinox, which is a solar marker, the new moon of Nisan, which is a lunar marker, and of course the constellation of Aries, which is about the stars. We have the sun, moon, and stars all right here helping us out, representing fire, representing the passion that comes. I know that the sign of Aries is one that is seen as a very passionate, possibly even headstrong constellation, and it is it's what's happening right now. We're moving right into this this time of year where that passion and that hot-headedness comes to fruition. There's a lot of words that begin with Shin, and the one that comes, of course, to mind right off the bat is the indwelling presence, the Shekhinah, the feminine indwelling presence of the divine. But also Shuva, which is return. Again, coming back to that 9, that idea of renewal. We have Shuva, and the idea of wholeness, Shalom, starts with the Shin as well, and change, Shini. So all things change, and seasons change, and months change, and constellations change in the sky. I love that Shin speaks to transformation around that. There's a mythical animal in the Talmud called the Ziz, which is sort of like a phoenix. It's a bird that burns up into ash and then transforms and comes back alive. So that idea of renewal and change and cleansing through fire also is right here in the reading. And I think that's beautiful for this month of the Emperor of Aries. As we move forward down below, we have the mother letter of water, Mem. And this is also perfect for this month as it's coming up, because we're coming into telling the story of Passover, of Pesach. And in Pesach, there's just a ton of water references. Of course, Moses begins with the letter Mem, and he was put into water as a baby in order to be saved in a basket. So, and the person who put him in that basket was Miriam, his sister, and the water, it's called Mayim Haim. So we have all these mems. In some ways, Moses' little travel in his basket was like a very early mikvah meaning cleansing. So he was cleansed of that charge of death that came from the Pharaoh, and eventually rescued with the help of Miriam. And Miriam is said to be the one who had a magical well who followed her throughout the desert and the wilderness. So when they came through the Red Sea out of Mitzrayim, that birth process of coming through that narrow place of water, like the amniotic fluid of a birth, Miriam, when they received onto dry land on the other side, danced and sang and played timbrels and celebrated with the song of the sea. So Miriam is a really important character as we come through this time of liberation. And here she is in our reading, connecting, interestingly, the mother letter of water to the mother letter of fire. So we have and Vav between, which I think is just perfect for this, because we have this Mayim Chaim, these waters of life. Mem is also the number 40 in Gematria, which is corresponding to the 40 weeks of gestation of the human in the body. So there's more birth coming here. We've had some kind of good gestation before, and now we've got this this watery gestation that maybe is of concern. Again, it's a treacherous path to come through the water like that. But when one does and connects with the stars and the sun and the moon, then we come through to the other side. And what we have next down below is the letter Tav. And Tav is the last letter of the alphabet, and it represents a completion cycle. It's said to be a stamp or a seal. Some people say that, in fact, Shin possibly is the last letter of the alphabet, but that Tav was put as a signature at the very end of the alphabet. Tav represents the moon in the sky, and since we are at the new moon just right now, this is a wonderful thing. But it is mysterious. The moon can be challenging, because during the dark of the moon, as we are right now, it's sometimes challenging to see what's coming ahead. And as we come through this time of concern about power and sovereignty through the waters that are somewhat treacherous, we have this completion cycle, but we're in the dark still, because it is the dark of the moon. We haven't seen things come to light yet. Far up above, we have the letter Kuf. And Kuf is the letter that represents the month of Adar, the month that is just coming to a close right now. Here we have the Kuf, which represents Kadosh, the holiness or sacredness of the divine. But also it represents the animalistic nature, the Kof, the monkey that dwells within each of us, that desire to just have a little bit of fun in the world. And it's up high, which I like, because it does say that we've had a pleasant time, maybe a happy time in the month of Adar. It said that the month of Adar increases joy, and as we move into Nisan, that's when joy actually arrives. And our final letter in the reading is the letter Aleph, and Aleph is the number 1. It's the letter that represents oneness and wholeness, and the idea of divinity above and divinity below, and the connection and division between. So we have the Yud above representing the divine, and the Yud below representing the divine, and then that Vav again that we started with, right in the middle, connecting and separating. The letter Aleph is the letter that speaks to that idea of unity and multiplicity at the same time. Aleph is 1, but if you pronounce it as Elef, it means 1,000. So we have this idea of the multiplicity of the divine in all things, but only one God. So I'm loving that. I read a commentary recently from Jericho Vincent, who was referencing another commentary that the letter Aleph spelled backwards is Felah, which means miracle. And so one of the things that comes through our this time of Nisan is the miracle of the liberation of the people as they come through that narrow place. And those narrow places, I mean, the Vav is a narrow letter, but we have the Tet representing birth, and we have the Mem representing birth here too. And birth is, there's nothing that is more narrow than coming through on a birth canal. And the whole liberation story of the Exodus from Mitzrayim is such a birth story, coming through that watery place out into freedom after having been constricted for some very long period of time. So as we look at our month of Nisan coming up ahead, our central issue to focus on is connection. How are we connecting with divinity? How are we connecting with each other as we come together during this time? How are we connecting fire with water? How are we connecting? Are we making soup, perhaps? A lot of us are. But also balancing our idea of power and sovereignty within ourselves and with others, the idea of justice that has come before now, and gestation we have twice in this reading. So something very good has been gestated and brought us to where we are now, and now we have the challenge of gestating another thing and moving forward into a completion cycle. Holding on to that joy, holding on to the holiness and the sacred foolery that came with the month of Adar and Purim perhaps, and stepping back into oneness of the Aleph. And the emperors are about kings, but the sovereignty of the divine is the ultimate sovereignty, both with feminine, masculine, and non-binary sovereignty. So we need to find our own personal sovereignty in all of this as we step into Nisan, as we step into this new year of the kings and celebrate our liberation. And I appreciate everyone who stays with me and watches these videos through to the end. I'm just so happy and blessed to have such a wonderful community of people. If you're interested in the Hebrunes, please do find my link below. I just restocked my shop with a few that I have available, hopefully more coming soon. But I do appreciate everyone who's here today. If you enjoy these readings, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That very much helps me. And I will hopefully see you here next time. Chodesh Tov. Have a beautiful Nisan. Have a wonderful Passover. Hopefully I'll see you before then in a couple of weeks. But Chodesh Tov to everyone.